Has anybody noticed that when the Montreal Canadiens lose games this year, they seem to lose them in pretty spectacular fashion? Kind of like what they did against the Pittsburgh Penguins last week when they lost 6-0. And then when they win, they seem to win in a spectacular fashion, like how they won 6-3 over the Nashville Predators last weekend. Let's see if we could try to figure that all out in this weird season as it is for the Montreal Canadiens on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm Julian McKenzie alongside Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, Jess Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, former Montreal Canadien and former Montreal Canadiens assistant coach, Rick Green. We're going to try not to make too many jokes about your Washington Capitals and how bad they've been compared to what the Arizona Coyotes might be now, as they are challenging for the title of worst team ever in the NHL. That's not the podcast for that, but I am going to make that dig at you just because, Rick.
Thank you for reminding me, Julian. Those were just those were such memorable years.
I'm telling you, we got to get a bonus episode in where you just spend time telling us some story about those days. But we don't need to hang out in those days for now. We can hang out in the present, where the Montreal Canadiens are coming off some pretty interesting results over the last two games. They get battered by the Pittsburgh Penguins last week. 6-0, as I mentioned before. They go up to a 5-0 lead on the Nashville Predators. They almost blow it, but they still win it against the Predators 6-3. And we're doing this podcast ahead of their game against the Washington Capitals in Washington. I don't know what to expect. Are they going to lose badly? Are they going to win? Great. This team just can't. They haven't had like a loss this year where they were like the straight up better team and then just still lose that game. They just haven't had that yet. What takeaways do you take of these last two games where they look horrible in one night and then they look like world beaters in another night?
Well, bachelors for a second for Rick, the price of being a number one overall draft pick, right? Back then it was, people always think that a number one pick is going to save everything for a franchise. A bad team, one player isn't going to change everything. For people who are thinking the Canadiens should tank this season because a top pick is going to fix all their problems, not necessarily. But as you mentioned, Julian, when they win big, they win big, and when they lose big. And against Nashville, they came very close to losing spectacularly big because 5-0, 5-3. Nashville had two great chances to make it 5-4, just missed. And if it was 5-4, the way this Canadiens team has been so fragile, you have to think 5-5 was coming pretty soon after that. They survived that. They got the empty net goal. Everybody took a deep breath, and they won. But, I mean, the reason they were even in that game is because of Sam Montembeault in the first period. They were totally outplayed by Nashville in that first period. They're outshot. It was 18-1 or something like that at some point. Montembeault played great and kept them in the game, and then the Canadiens got a few goals. And at the end, though, again, it just shows, I think, one of the big problems with this team is just how goaltending has been an issue and just how fragile they are. When things go good, everything's good, and then when something goes bad, it's like, oh boy. And I think they're sitting on the bench going, oh no, this can't happen. I'm sure some guys, when it was 5-3, I was in the press box with my buddy Pat Hickey, and I said, if they score the fourth goal, they're going to win. And they came so close to doing it. They didn't. The Canadiens hung on, but that's the season it is. And I think with their fragile team, that's what happens. When things are going good, you get some confidence, and as soon as things start to go bad, everything falls apart.
Yeah, there's been no middle ground in this season. It's been high or low, and there's been more lows than high so far this year. But I think with that game against Nashville, they had a good second period where they scored 4 goals. And that's been the trouble with them so far this year, not being able to play a full 60 minutes. And specifically that second period, it's almost like they don't realize that there's no intermission at that point. It's over. You're supposed to be out there playing. But then with Nashville, we saw that third period, they didn't come out and play the way that they should have or kept that momentum going. And then they started to get a little bit nervous there. And it looked like maybe Nashville would be able to get the comeback. But in the end, they got the win. And that's the most important thing. But it's just really hard to sort of figure out this team. And I think it's what Stu said, when you don't necessarily have the confidence, and confidence comes when you're able to string together a bunch of games, something that they haven't been able to do. They haven't been able to win back-to-back games or go on a long winning streak. And I think that's what the problem is. They can't get the confidence until they start doing that.
Yeah, and I think most of today's athletes do have some pride. And when you go into a game like Pittsburgh where you get totally embarrassed in all areas of the game. You've got your fans booing you in your own building. I mean, if that doesn't touch a note, I don't know what will. And, looking at the following game against Nashville, you have to give Montembeault full credit for making key saves at the key times. It allowed, defensive lapses again by the Canadiens for him to patch that up, to allow them to, work a little bit better on the offensive side, which we saw with Lehkonen getting his first goal, Poehling chipping in for a couple. But their overall game, I thought, was obviously a step in the right direction. You got guys that seem to be more committed to getting involved. Josh Anderson looked really upset, obviously, for him to get involved like he did, and the whole group of them, I think, were, judging from what I saw, were quite upset with what they had seen before, and they showed up and decided to play hard, and that's a bonus for them, because we haven't seen that type of consistency very often so far this year.
And kudos to Montembeault, because you wonder how many more starts he was going to get before Marc Bergevin started looking elsewhere for goaltending help. And you can imagine the pressure on him at home. Hasn't played well up until this point. And as we said, he's the reason that they stayed in that game in the first period. So you can only imagine the pressure that was on him, and he handled it well in that game. It'll be interesting to see if he can carry some momentum. Jake Allen's back now, so we don't know when Montembeault will get back in goal, but that must have been a huge confidence boost for him.
Rick, I just want to ask you this question. For a team like the Canadiens, where it's been so hard for them to kind of generate any positive momentum and turn it into a stretch of wins, just put on your coaching hat for a second. What would you do in a situation like this with a team that's coming off that win against the Nashville Predators? What would you do to try to help them, kind of sustain that positive momentum?
Well, I think you have to, basically break down some of the good things that they did and reinforce to each and every guy what part of the game they need to continue to do a lot of the little things. And I mean, the bottom line will never change, is you have to compete as hard as you can, and you have to outwork the opposition. And if you do that, it gives you a chance. And then, like we said about goaltending, is critical. But I think overall, as a team, I think you have to highlight some of the positives, some of the details of the game that give them some success. And if you look at it, they were a little bit better in the offensive zone as far as their trapping goes, not giving too many real bad defensive breakdowns. They kept it fairly simple and disciplined, and they have to build from that. So, I think as a coach, you can't continue day in and day out, harp on all the negativity and all the negative things. You speak to them about those areas that need to be improved on, but I think it's really important that you also highlight that there are some positive things that guys have done. Now do it consistently, and it gives a chance to win every night.
As just mentioned, though, I mean, heading into the game against Washington, they haven't won 2 games in a row all season. And this is an issue going back to last season. Last season, they never won more than 3 in a row during the regular season. It's a team that's had problems getting on a hot streak. They won 7 in a row in the playoffs, which is why they made it to the Stanley Cup final. But in the regular season, they haven't been able to put together a long winning streak. And the only hope, the very, very, very slim hope this team has of getting back in the playoff race is to win like 7 or 8 in a row. And you can't see that happening.
And you can tell from this week's practice, especially Monday, the positive energy was there. Obviously, it's a lot easier to come to practice after you've won a game, but it just seemed like there was a lot more lightness. The players were very happy, very positive about the situation. And we'll see if that kind of attitude can be used to motivate them going into more games. That don't get too down on yourself. Remember that you can win games. That kind of thing can maybe be used as a way to give them a little bit more motivation.
Can you imagine being in your locker room just like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Stu.
It was a little shootout competition they had at the end of the practice when Mike Pezzetta scored the winning goal. It was him and Drouin, the last 2 shooters, and Pezzetta scored. And Pezzetta's been a real breath of fresh air on this team. I think the guys really like him. You could tell by the celebration after he scored how happy they were for him.
Yeah. Could you imagine being in a locker room where you don't win as many games and you just have to be like, hey, remember when we were able to win games? What that must be like?
It must be what the locker room is like for the New York Jets.
Why did you do that? That's not. You know what? That's
I'm a Giants fan. It's not much better over there.
I know. No, hey, at least you could say you've won Super Bowls in your lifetime. Anyway, let me go on to the next question. Ryan Poehling, he's a guy who scored a couple goals over the weekend, too, on some pretty great shots. He was asked about it in the media room after the fact, and he said, shoot or shoot. I don't know why people in the media thought he said something else. I don't know if people realize this. There was a whole debate over this quote, shoot or shoot, from Ryan Poehling. People thought he said something else completely different. It was shoot or shoot. There was literally like a whole mini argument that escalated. But anyway, what do you guys think of Ryan Poehling's play since he was called up from the American Hockey League?
This is the kind of play that I was hoping to see from him throughout training camp, because there was a lot made of him being able to have that opportunity to earn himself a spot on the team, that it was his spot to lose, and he ultimately lost it by not having the kind of performance that he needed to. And I think now he's realized that he's got to work a little bit harder, and he's finding great chemistry with his line mates. They're bringing a lot of energy as well. So when they're not scoring goals, they're a line that's able to bring some energy. Him getting those 2 quick goals against Nashville, I think, is huge for him. And perhaps he's had that wake-up call that he needed, that, yes, you were a first-round pick, but you got to work hard. They're not just going to hand it to you. They're going to probably give you a longer leash than a 5th-round pick. But if you want to be in the NHL, you got to work. And I think he's realized now what he needs to do to be an NHL player.
And I really believe he's responded in a very positive way, since he's arrived. He seems to be quite a bit more confident. He's skating really well. And let's not forget, he's got good size too. This kid has got some size and some strength. And I don't think he totally understands how effective he can be when he really sticks his nose in there and gets involved. And he seems to be doing that. And look at his face-off percentage at 48% to date. I think is going to improve with time, because he seems to be pretty good at it. And I just hope he's given much more opportunity to play in a lot of situations, because right now he's a really nice breath of fresh air to see him stepping into the lineup and bringing what he's bringing, because he's excited and he wants to make the difference. And that's the kind of guy that you want to have on your team.
Yeah, I'm one of the old guys in the media room who thought Poehling said shoot or shoot, and was corrected by the younger guys like Julian, who were saying,
your son never said shoot or shoot.
Well, he didn't say it clearly, but shoot or shoot to me.
No, he said shoot or shoot.
I agree.
You don't have to repeat this again, Stu.
I agree with you, but if he did say shoot or shoot, which he didn't, to me it was almost the same thing, because basically you have 2 options: shoot or shoot, or shoot or shoot. Anyway, but he shot the puck twice and he scored twice, which is good for him. So the thing with Ryan Poehling is he's grown up. I think that's the biggest thing. He has admitted he didn't handle it well when he was sent down to Laval a couple of seasons ago. He didn't handle it well. He sulked when he went down there. He didn't play. That obviously didn't sit well with Marc Bergevin and the Canadiens management, to see a guy go down and sulk like that. He was off that high of having 3 goals in his NHL debut, the last game of the previous season, and the one in the shootout. Suffered a concussion during a preseason game, which set him back and was sent down. So you understand why the Canadiens sent him down at that point. He didn't understand, and he didn't handle it well. And he spoke about how he didn't handle it well. This time he was down in Laval. He said he was happy down there. He was like he understood what was going on. He played well. It showed in his play. Cole Caufield talked about how Poehling has been a leader when he was in Laval, doing everything right, working hard in practice. When Cole Caufield got sent down, the first person who texted him or called him was Ryan Poehling to say, basically, don't handle it the way I did. Go down there with a positive attitude, work on it. And he worked on that positive attitude in Laval. He got called up and he's played well. And I think for guys like him, a first-round pick is a guy. I'm sure Ryan Poehling's never been cut from any sports team in his life, whatever sport he played. He's an athletic kid, star in hockey. It's probably the first time he's ever been told you're not good enough to play on our team, and he didn't handle it well. But I think a lot of guys, first-round picks like that, have to realize that because you're a first-round pick doesn't mean you're going to be a star in the NHL. There's roles, and as Michel Therrien said, there's different chairs on different teams, and you have to find the chair that fits. So Ryan Poehling looks like he's going to probably be a third-line center. You can have a long career in the NHL as a solid third-line center and make a lot of money, but you have to get it in your head that I'm going to be a third-line center. I'm maybe not going to be a first-line center or second-line center, and do everything you can, as Rick mentioned, face-offs. Those are key on as you're a third-line center. being responsible on both ends of the ice. That's key. So you need to do all those little things right to prove you belong and have the coach trust you in a third line center and then, or fourth line center, even then maybe you move up and maybe, you know, I mean, I think back Torrey Mitchell, when he was at the Canadiens, he had a long career in the NHL as a fourth line center. He was a star. I mean, I know Torrey grew up in the South Shore. I've watched him since he was a kid play. A star as a kid, a star at University of Vermont, and then he gets to the NHL, a fourth line centerman. So every guy in the NHL, especially now, is such a good hockey player. You have to find that chair that fits you. And I think Ryan Poehling is now finding the chair that fits him and accepting the chair that fits him and realizing what he has to do to keep that chair.
Marc Bergevin, as he's been for many of our episodes and for a lot of different outlets in this city in Montreal, is the topic of conversation next for us on Hockey Inside Out. Not necessarily about his contract status, but about what he can do with this team. It doesn't seem as if he's really able to make a trade that could help this team right now. At least that's what he is saying. He was on doing different interviews with a bunch of different outlets, essentially kind of saying the same thing. What are your thoughts on Marc Bergevin's comments when it comes to how he could be running this team right now and the fact that there aren't really any good deals for him to make that could help his team improve in the short term?
Well, for me, my impression is he still believes in this current players that they're going to be able to turn this thing around. And, 5 wins into the quarter way point is not a good thing. And the way that they're playing as a group obviously is a bad situation. And I don't know whether it's chemistry. I don't know, like a lot of people trying to pinpoint, other than there's a lot of underachievers. And, it's not easy to make trades. And if you're going to make a trade, are you going to make just a lateral move? Are you going to make a big name player trade? It's tough to do. And, I think he's maybe holding off a little bit. At least I'm assuming once he gets his whole lineup back, if he can, then maybe he'll address the issue at that point, saying, okay, we've got Byron back, we got Edmondson back, Price is another story. We have our majority of our guys back ready to play. Let's get a read on where we're at once they come back, and then maybe he'll be a little more aggressive on the phone and try and make some changes. But I don't think it's an easy job, and I think that he's obviously staying the status quo until he gets his team back, and then if they continue to struggle, let's see what options are available to him.
Well, he's also right up against the cap, so that makes it hard. I mean, it'd have to be a money in, money out trade. If you're dealing some guys, you got to get. If you want a guy that's making $5 million in a trade, you got to get rid of $5 million on your team. So that handcuffs you in that point. And Bergevin says often, you build your team in the summer and then you hope for the best. And the trade deadline coming up, and personally, if I'm Jeff Molson, I'm not allowing Marc Bergevin to make any trades until the general manager situation is resolved, whether it's him or whoever else is coming back. If you're bringing in a new GM, which certainly seems the case, you want that guy to decide what he wants to do with this team, not Marc Bergevin. He's not going to be here. I mean, I believe Marc Bergevin when he says, he's not going to do anything to damage the Canadiens. He has the Canadiens in his heart, and it would damage his reputation moving forward to make a stupid trade. But I just don't think it's going to happen. And on the other hand, who on the Canadiens right now does anybody really want? There's so many guys struggling. I mean, Jeff Petrie is a guy with a big contract. He's not playing well. I don't think there's a big lineup to get Jeff Petrie now.
Ben Sherratt.
Yeah, Ben Sherratt. I mean, I can see Ben Sherratt being moved at the trade deadline, but who do you replace Ben Sherratt with? They're so weak on defense. Now you lose Ben Sherratt, who plays a lot of minutes in a lot of different roles. So it's easy to say get rid of Ben Sherratt. Who's going to take his place?
Sign Jordan Harris to an ELC, I guess.
Well, yeah, but guys, we're seeing from Cole Caufield, you don't just step into the NHL and become a star right away. So it's going to be tough for them to make any moves. And again, I don't think if I'm Jeff Molson, I'm not letting Marc Bergevin making any deals. And again, I think Jeff Molson has to have the general manager situation resolved before the trade deadline, because that's when you're going to move out a guy like Sherratt, whose contract is up, if he doesn't want to come back here. And other guys that you want to get rid of before the trade deadline. But again, I don't think it makes no sense to let a general manager start making moves when he's probably not going to be the general manager moving forward. If you're bringing in a new guy, it's up to him to decide which players on this team he wants to keep and which players he doesn't.
But that just seems like a broken system. You have a general manager there in place for when you have a situation like this, where you don't get off to a good start, to do something to shake things up, have a little bit of a wake-up call for this team. And right now, with nothing being done, it just kind of seems like the Canadiens are okay with it. I took it as, once again, Marc Bergevin saying that it's not his problem, it's the players. And we've heard that before when the Canadiens have not had a good season, that he's blamed it on the players and have not taken responsibility for it. Now, you know what? If they did trade a Ben Chiarot and there's no one to replace him, but at this point, who cares? The team's not doing well. If they continue to struggle, it doesn't look like they'll be able to make a playoff. They'll make the playoffs. If you don't have another defenseman there, if you get a good asset in return, down the line, it might help you. But I just find it very bizarre that nothing has been done at this point in the season to shake anything up. And I brought this up before, that year where Perry Pern was fired, the assistant coach, who was clearly not the problem, but something was done to just sort of have that shock factor, and nothing is being done at all.
How about firing Stefan Waite in the middle of a game?
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't say the Canadiens didn't do any of that last year, at least. They got rid of Waite. They got rid of Claude Julien. They made all those moves in the offseason last year.
Well, Bergevin blaming the players, though, I go back to the season when he blamed the bad attitude in the room. And sitting there, you're the guy who put all those guys in the room. So if there's a bad attitude in the room, that's on you. That's as much, if not more, than it's on the players. If you couldn't build a team that had chemistry in the room, you're the guy who built it. Every guy in that room, he'd been there lying. Every guy in that room you put there. So again, it's on the players, he says, but these players just aren't good enough at this point.
And usually,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm going to say usually if the GM has been removed, usually the coaching staff goes along with that. So you got a couple interesting scenarios, moving forward, depending on who's going to make the calls in the upstairs, and then it'll filter down from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the deafening silence from Jeff Molson. I think part of it is he's trying to figure out what the heck he's going to do, because as you're right, I mean, a new GM is going to want to decide which players stay or go. A new GM is going to want to decide who his coaches are. So it could be, and there's a lot of money involved, because Molson's still paying Claude Julien $5 million not to coach this year. He just signed Ducharme to a 3-year, $5.1 million contract. If a new GM comes in and gets rid of the coaching staff, I believe the whole coaching staff has 3-year contracts. Now you're paying those guys for 3 years. You're paying the new guys what they're making. If he cleans out the scouting, so there's a lot of money involved in cleaning out everybody. And with Jeff Molson, as you want to pay, I mean, I think that I'm sure the holdup with Marc Bergevin's contract is money. I mean, there was a contract offer reportedly made during the offseason. Bergevin didn't think it was enough for what he had done, bringing the team to the Stanley Cup final. And that, to me, that's the only thing that I can see holding this up. Molson doesn't want to pay him what he thinks he's worth. And but bringing in a new GM could cost even more money if that new GM wants to clear everybody else out.
Here's the last thing I'll say on this. I'm just going to list off guys who are going to be UFAs into next year for the Canadiens. Ben Chiarot, Brett Kulak, Chris Weidman, Cedric Paquette, and Mathieu Perreault. Look, if you're in a position where you're trying to offload some assets, I don't know if those are necessarily the most enticing assets to offload. The Canadiens have a lot of guys who are locked into contracts for the next few years. You talk about money being allotted to coaching staff. A lot of their guys are locked in because of the fact that Marc Bergevin believed in this core so much that he thought they'd be able to compete for the next few years. I just wonder, when he says that he's not able to make trades, before it was okay, you know what, he believes in the team and all of that sort of stuff. I wonder now if it's just because his hands are, and yes, I understand that he could be gone at the end of this year, but his hands might be tied. He might have fired every possible blank he could fire. He already let go of the coaching staff last year. He already brought in a bunch of free agents to try to turn it around. I wonder what he could actually really do, to be honest.
Well, that group of players you mentioned, I mean, the only one he's going to get anything for is Chiarot. There'll be Chiarot's a guy that'll be for a team either trying to make the playoffs or looking at the Stanley Cup. He's a valuable guy, a big physical guy who can play a ton of minutes, as we saw in the Stanley Cup finals last season in the playoffs. Played really well during the playoffs. Other GMs around the league would have noticed that. Kills penalties, physical, not fun to play against, willing to fight if he has to fight. I mean, they'd get a good return for Ben Chiarot, but the other guys, you're not going to get anything.
Okay.
And I mean, why wait? If you can do something sooner than later, don't wait for the trade deadline. let's get the phone going. And Ben Sherratt, if somebody really wants him and they can come back with something else that could help, the Canadiens, then you gotta think about it. I mean, I don't think his future with the Montreal Canadiens is solid in Sherratt, but like I said, they have to entertain any type of offers at this point with any of their players, because the group that they have, it doesn't seem to be working.
And Sherratt, though, I mean, here's a guy who wanted to play in Montreal. He was a free agent. When he signed here, he spoke about how he wanted to play Saturday night at the Bell Center. He wanted to play in a Canadian market. He wanted everything that comes with being a Montreal Canadian. And there's so many guys out there that don't want anything to do with that. So as I said, to get rid of Ben Sherratt, a guy who wants to be here, who are you going to bring in to replace him? There's a lot of guys that don't want to play in Montreal. And the situation this season isn't going to help that moving forward. That guys will be, I don't know. Thanks, but no thanks. I'll go play somewhere else.
Jess, do you want to add anything before we move on to Cole Caufield?
I just think that the Canadiens have to do something to shake it up, and saying that I went out there and I tried and it didn't work doesn't really make sense. It also doesn't really make sense if you have someone in a GM position that you don't think will be the general manager next year. Like, at that point, he's just a guy going in, collecting his paycheck week to week. So cut the cord now, like, do something. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Like, right at the beginning of the season, the Canadiens kind of said, we're not going to talk about Bergeron's contract until the season's over. Like that
feels like that's all we've done.
Well, exactly. Exactly. Like, why? That was another in many, many, many not smart PR moves by the Canadiens.
Okay, well, we'll move on to Cole Caufield and why he hasn't necessarily been producing as many have well, I guess me here, because I picked him to be the Calder Trophy. Thank God I didn't bet on that, right? There are other people in Toronto who are like, oh, Michael Bunting's better. Anyway, that's a whole other episode in itself. Why is Cole Caufield having such a hard time producing right now for the Montreal Canadiens?
Because it's not easy to play in the NHL. It's not easy to score goals.
Yeah, but
it's not easy to go directly from university hockey to the NHL. And it's even harder when you're 5'6" and 165 pounds or whatever Cole Caufield is. He came in, Rick can probably speak to this better than me. I'm sure some of the defensemen didn't really know much about him. I don't think NHL guys spend a lot of time watching NCAA hockey. They probably couldn't figure out some of his moves or some of what he does. And it looks like they have figured it out now. And shots that go in the NCAA don't go in against NHL goalies. And, the longer you go without scoring, the more you lose confidence as a goal scorer. Cole Caufield last season in the NCAA, the longest he went without scoring a goal was 4 games. That was the first 4 games of the season. After that, he was on fire. Heading into the game against Washington this week, he had gone 17 games with the Canadiens without a goal, going back to the last 5 games of the playoffs last season. He's never experienced anything like this. This is a learning experience for him about what it's like not to score goals. And if you're a 30 goal scorer in the NHL, that means there's at least 52 games that you don't score. So what are you going to do during those other 52 games or more? Because usually you get a game or two with 1 or 2 with more than 1 goal. What are you going to do? And he's learning his way. He's a kid making a huge jump from NCAA to the NHL. He's not a big body. He seems to be I won't say intimidated. He seems to be hesitant sometimes now going into the corners. And it's just another highlight of it's not easy to play in the NHL. It's a big jump, and it takes time. And you look at a guy like Joe Thornton, who's a top pick. He struggled with the Bruins when he first came into the NHL, and he was 6'3" and 200 and something pounds. So it's a tough league to play in. And you got defensemen like Big Rick there hammering you into the boards and taking great joy in doing it. And it's hard.
And I think last year was just such an unusual year. He finished his NCAA career, then he went to Laval, then he was with the Habs, and they had this playoff run that no one expected them to have. And I think it's part of, the adrenaline of being called up and just going out there and playing. Also, as Stu mentioned, not being as familiar to your opponents, being a brand new player that they haven't really been able to watch. But now it's a whole new scenario. It's a real season. It's not just playing the Canadian teams, and it's not the playoff season. It's the regular season. It's the grind of the NHL that players have to get used to and learn it. And we've spoken about this last year when Cole Caufield was first called up, that you have to be patient with this player, that it's not a player that's going to go out there and from day one be a consistent NHL player. He's not a Sidney Crosby. He's not one of those kind of players. And to expect these ups and downs in his career and not to panic when he's not playing as well as we've seen him before, it's just a matter of him figuring out his game.
And we all had high expectations of this kid, from when he came in and the things that he did so early on. But let's realize, here's a 20-year-old that's, still quite immature from the standpoint of NHL experience. And, opposition knows what they're up against when he's on the ice. But we have to really handle this kid right, in the way that you can't have him feeling, down and depressed about his game and, taking away from what he does best, because he's going to find his way back to scoring. I'm hoping that Suzuki, Toffoli are going to be big parts of helping him, find his groove and, get his game back to the point where he's contributing and he's doing things really well on the offensive side. Now, I think it's just a matter of time before he will do that. But right now, he's feeling a lot of pressure. It's tough on the kid, and he's going to grow from this. And he's got all of the ingredients to be a good, solid goal scorer in the league. Now he just has to figure out how to do it each and every night.
Yeah, I mean, the sophomore jinx is a real thing in sports. I mean, he's still technically a rookie this season, but it is his second year. And for whatever reason, it gets harder. Players know you better. There's a lot of reasons, I think, factor into that. And, if you Google the Hobey Baker Award, which he won last season, and look at the list of previous winners, there's a lot of guys there who didn't do a whole lot in the NHL. I'm not saying Cole Caufield's not going to do a whole lot in the NHL. He has an elite shot. He has a weapon that he can shoot the puck to score goals. But it's a big, comparing the NCAA and the NHL is apples and oranges. It's a lot different. You only play 32 games in the NCAA. You don't play 82. It's more of a grind in the NHL. You don't have the same travel. NCAA, you only play on the weekends. You're home at school all week and you travel on Friday or Saturday. You come back. It's a whole different world going to the NHL. And it's, as I said, it's hard. And there's growing pains right now with Caufield. And again, I mean, this kid could end up being a 30 goal scorer in the NHL because that shot he has is elite, but it's going to take time to figure everything out for him. And we're seeing that right now.
I actually Googled the list of Hobey Baker winners, by the way. There are guys who I have no clue about who, maybe they'll have an NHL career, maybe they won't. Guys like Marty Serdich or Junior Lassard. Those are like 2000s guys who actually, funny enough, there's a Quebec guy, Junior Lassard, who won. Who I'm not sure if they really made much of themselves as NHL players, but there are guys like Johnny Gaudreau, Jack Eichel, Cale Makar, who have won this honor as well. So you don't have Blake Jeffrey on, funny enough, once upon a time, a Canadiens prospect who also won the Hobey Baker Award. It's very hit or miss, I guess, in terms of projecting an NHL career. But there are some guys, and Cole Caufield could easily be one of those guys who, even if he isn't a superstar player, could turn himself into an NHL star, or at least into an everyday NHL player.
The thing with Cole Caufield, he's a goal scorer, so he has to score. I mean, that's what he's here for, is to score. So if he's not scoring, that's his one thing that he brings. He's not a physical presence. He's a goal scorer. So he's got to score. If he's not scoring,
and it'd be nice to have him with a good supporting cast. So he's not doing it alone. He's got to get some guys that can help him out. And any of those good goal scorers, they need good guys on their line that can help in his production. And hopefully that's going to turn soon for him, so that he can get this kind of jinx off his back and he can carry on doing what he does best.
And Dominic Ducharme's doing everything to help him. He's keeping him on that first line while dropping Brendan Gallagher down to the third line. And I wonder how that maybe sits with Brendan Gallagher also. But so they're giving him every opportunity to score, and it's just not happening.
Jess, do you want last word before we wrap up?
He's just has a lot of talent, and I'm hoping that he will be able to find his scoring touch again, because he was so much fun to watch last year. And you know what? He probably gets carded at the SAQ. That's how young he is.
Yeah, he definitely does. Thank you, Jess. You're absolutely right.
He probably does. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Stu, Rick, Jess, thank you so much, as always, for participating. And thank you all at home or wherever you're watching this episode for watching this episode. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. You can go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to check that out, and visit hockeyinsideout.com for other episodes and for other articles and great fun stuff that the site has to offer. Peace.